Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. So I appreciate the bio. I appreciate the intro. My only real qualification for teaching is that I have a question and it's been aching at me. That's it. The rest, everyone else on the call, I'll be looking to for discussion and answers later. I just resent a link. If you'd like to have a PDF of the text that we're using, I'll be sharing them on screen, but I just shared them through the chat box. So please feel free to help yourself. And I'm going to try and bounce back and forth. You'll have the PDF to read. So I'm going to only focus in on the text that I want us to dig deep into. So let me start with this. Weeks ago, I had two experiences that kind of collided with one with the other. One is I bumped into someone from shul at the supermarket, and this is the guy that I sit next to. This is the first person that I give a hug to at the end of Friday night services before I go off and do whatever comes next. And he was walking through the produce section. I hadn't seen him in weeks because our shul shut down, and he was wearing one of the N95 masks, fitting very loosely, like it wasn't really on correctly. And he started losing, and he started getting closer and closer and closer. And I finally just broke off the conversation, and I kind of turned tail and ran. I sent him a really nice text before Shabbat, but I could feel in my gut this sense of, I don't know where you've been. I don't know how healthy I am, and I really need to step back. So at the same time as that happened, my sister, who lives in the Bay Area, told me, she was just walking around with this feeling of sadness that people don't make eye contact anymore when you're out walking. And I'm the kind of person, I'll stop and talk in the vegetable section to anyone in the world. And the loss of that, it feels tremendous to me. So the last piece of this that came together was this suspicious sense that, I've heard this before. My mind went back to the Haftarah for Tisha B'Av, and I thought of this verse in Isaiah. And by the way, the text that we're going to work with today, I'll put on screen. I'll put the text on screen in just a moment. But all the texts, the ones that I translated, if you notice anything odd about the translation, it's because between my keyboard and the screen came out that way. All the Hebrew texts are at the end. And I'm going to keep the text in English just for consistency of language and to make sure that everyone has kind of equal access. So here's the text that came to mind. Let me wander in the desert, far away from my people, all corrupt and full of betrayal. Beware of others and trust no one. Your brothers will bring you down. Your friends spout stories in their wake. I thought of this sense, ish mirehu nizharu, this sense of being suspicious of people, and I actually felt that in such a palpable sense that I've gone through public spaces like the grocery store. It made me wonder about what is it about connecting with other people that is really sacred and really special. And what is it that's under attack in addition potentially to our health? So I thought about two people who I had encountered in studying Talmud, two different personalities. One is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who's a leader of the Jewish people, founder of the academy in Yavne. None of Judaism as we know it right now would exist without his valorous and incredible work. And the other is a sage less known, Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. I'll read about him in a second. So here's how I want to start. I want to look at how these two sages greeted people in social situations that maybe they knew well and maybe they had never met before. And this is where the journey starts. So from the Talmud Bavli Brachot. And Julie, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see it. One thing, you do keep freezing a little bit, so maybe there's I don't know if there's an internet issue, but if all your other windows are closed, maybe that would help. But we do see your screen.
Okay, so I'll tell you what. Let me go and close everything, anything else, and thank you for pointing that out. I'm just going to close anything else that might be slowing down my computer. So do I want to, yes, close tabs. Okay, and again, thank you so much for, thanks so much for calling that out. Okay, good. And let me know if that becomes an issue again, okay? Okay, good. All right, so truly wonderful story. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. They say that no one ever managed to greet Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai first, not even an idolatrous pagan that he might meet in the marketplace. And the language in the Talmud is afilu nochri, afilu goy shebashuk. So a question, why is it that no one ever greeted Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? Wasn't a nice guy. People didn't know him, people didn't like him. So it turns out that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had made as a spiritual practice that whenever he encountered a person, he would extend greetings, no matter who the person was, no matter what their background, their social status, what religion they were. He was the person who always said hello first. And that's always stuck with me as a kind of something about the soul of this man is reflected in the fact that he is the greeter. He is the one who extends welcome to you, no matter who you are. In other words, he opens that bubble around him and draws you in. There's a comment from the Chafetz Chaim, who's a modern, born in 1838 in Europe, in what's Belarus now. So his commentary was that when the rabbi spoke about this, they had already extended this as a precept, right? Be the first to extend greetings. That comes from Pirkei Avot. So what did they really mean? They didn't just mean this in general. They mean even someone who dislikes you, even someone that you have enmity or tension with, be gracious and open yourself to that person so that they eventually come to care for you and to love you. So pause there for a second. So here I have one type of person, one kind of character trait. I'm going to welcome you into my world. And let's remember that at the time the Babylonian Talmud is written, at the time of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, afilu goy shebashuk is the words of the Talmud, afilu nochri shebashuk. The Romans came to destroy Jerusalem during the days of Rabbi Yochanan. He was welcoming people who might have been part and party to his death or destruction. That takes a lot of graciousness and a lot of openness and maybe some exposure to risk. So I want to turn over to a different kind of person now. And this person is another sage called Yossi ben Kisma. And I'm not gonna, let's just encounter the text and let's see what we see about him. So in Mishnah Avot, there's a curious story. It's in the last chapter of Pirkei Avot, which people have questions about whether the chapter really belongs there. But here's what happened. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma related, I was once on a journey, and some person encountered me. And this stranger extended greetings. So I returned the greetings. The stranger asked, my master, from where are you? So I replied, from a great city with many scholars and sages. The stranger asked, my master, perhaps you might agree to live with us in our place, and I'll offer you thousands of gold dinars, gems, and pearls. I responded, my child, not for all the money in the world would I leave a place of Torah. It feels like a very different person. The response to that was made by, I found a commentary by a very fascinating and sort of an understudied person, Moshe Alshech, who was, he was born in the Ottoman Empire, moved to Tzfat, he was born in the early 1500s. And he asked a rather obvious question. How is it that another person could have greeted Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma first? He must have been so preoccupied in thinking about some verse in the Torah, he didn't even pay attention to the person in front of him. So naturally, the stranger saw him first and exchanged greetings and extended greetings in advance. So here's the first pause. What do we know about the persona of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai compared to the persona of Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. What do we see so far? And I want to pause for a minute or two or three and take inputs and thoughts and suggestions. Feel free to use the chat box. Feel free to ask for feel free to pop in. Ask for the microphone, and Julie, if anyone would like to be unmuted, go right ahead. What do we know about these people, for starters? Yeah, this is the uncomfortable pause that happens in groups of talking.
There's a lag time. They'll come through. We have someone in the chat box. Deb says one is a people person, and the second is a text person.
So, and does a people person mean, right? I satisfied not, and I'm curious. A text person, is that pejorative? Is that praiseworthy? Is there any stacking of one personality type being better than the other personality type? Is anybody bothered by the fact?
Deb, do you want to be unmuted? Deb says I mean text as in a book scholar.
Right. So I'm bookish. And by the way, and I don't hear that to be negative. I don't hear that to be a down. I hear that just to be right, just to be factual. Okay, great. Thanks. And thank you for the thumbs up. I saw the thumbs up come in there. Okay. So it doesn't mean call it my original read on this. And I take you back to the rest of the text now, and I'm going to make the conversation even harder. So my original read is that, wow, Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma is so self-centered. I mean, he's a sage. You're walking down the road. It's written in the Mishnah. You're not supposed to leave people unmet or ungreeted. And he's in his own world. So on a gut level, I want to be critical of him, but at the same time, I don't see anything in his conduct that's ungracious. Perhaps he's very focused on one thing, but there's clearly a difference of focus. People, when I was actually in rabbinic school, it was a wonderful class. Someone brought a painting as opposed to a text and gave me a tour of how the artist draws your eye through the painting. So, okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's eye is drawn first to the other person, and Yossi ben Kisma's is first drawn to something that's an idea. It's not linked to a person. They're very, very different kinds of personalities. So I want to take you the next step now. And I'll share my screen back. And the text that for me has always been perplexing, one that you might not have seen before, and the other that I think is used in many places, but not in the way we'll use it here. I'd like to speak about the end of the life of our first sage. So this is from Bavli Brachot, and the story is related. When Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai fell upon his deathbed, his students came to visit him. And upon seeing them, he burst into tears. So students asked, "O light of Israel, foundation of our world, mighty hammer that you are, so why do you cry?" He replies with a very long run-on sentence. It's a run-on sentence in the Hebrew, by the way, and so I translated it in the same in the English. "I were only being brought to judgment after my death, presumably, before a king of flesh and blood, here today, gone tomorrow to the grave, who, if he be angered, that angered is not eternal, who, if he imprisoned me, it would only be temporary, who, if he had me killed, that death would only be temporal, a king, pardon the typo, whom I could cajole or bribe, in that case, I would surely weep. But now they're bringing me before the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be God, who lives forever, and if anger is eternal, and if God imprisons me, it is for eternity, and if God has me put to death, that death is ultimate, whom I could never persuade or bribe. Would I not weep all the more? And that is not all. Two paths stand before me, one towards paradise and one towards the pit, and I have no idea which destination awaits me after my death. Should I not cry? Now, by the way, just to interject, Yochanan ben Zakkai, the great pious leader of Israel has no idea whether he's going to paradise or not after his death, all the more speaks of a kind of humility of soul about this person, which just cements it to me. So the students don't answer, and they respond in a very strange way. "Oh, Master, bless us." Rabbi Yochanan replied, "Okay, may you fear God as much as you do your next door neighbor." And the students are stunned. Like that's all? I should fear God as much as my next door neighbor? That's it? He replied, "If only we feared God even that much. For when a person goes to commit a sin, they do not ask, 'Will God notice?' but rather, 'I hope no one sees me.'" At the hour of his death, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai called out, "Clear the dishes from the house so they do not become impure. Set aside a seat for Hizkiah, the king of Judea, who will be visiting." At the last moment of his life, he reminds his students to look upon other people and use the way they look at other people as kind of a spiritual inspiration for how they can connect with God, as if to say, you might have a hard time understanding how to stand in awe and reverence of God, but think about how you'd feel if your neighbor were watching you. So for people, the person who commented that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a people person, even his spirituality is people engaged. He draws on his connections in social settings to help him understand how his soul can connect better with God. Don't miss the last two things that he says. Number one, clear the vessels from the house. What's that about? If he were to die and all the dishes were still in the house, they would become impure and would have to be broken. So the next to last thought in his life is, I don't want to inconvenience the people who will be left behind with broken dishes. Clear the dishes out of the house. Like that pedestrian a concern is actually a really gracious and caring statement. I don't want to inconvenience you. Clear the dishes. And then he says, oh, by the way, set a seat aside for the king of Judea who will be visiting. He worries about his household first, and then he worries about royalty. That is the person that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is. What a gracious, caring person. Now I want to take a breath. I want to look at the same, the second stage, Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. So what happens with Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma is very different, and it will lead to a story that you've seen before. I'll share it on the screen and read along. Our sages taught when Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma fell ill upon his deathbed, Rabbi Hanina ben Tradion went to visit. He asked, Hanina, brother, don't you know that this nation, he means Rome, was ordained by heaven to destroy God's house, burn God's temple, kill God's pious servants, and make an end to decent people? And yet that nation will endure. And yet I've heard that you sit and study, and in study of the law, that you gather crowds to learn in public, even sitting with a scroll of the Torah at your bosom as you do so. Those were things that Roman authorities had forbidden as a part of the persecution of the Jewish people at that time. So Hanina ben Tradion replied, heaven will have mercy. Yossi ben Kisma answered, I speak sense to you, but you reply, heaven will have mercy? I'll be shocked if they don't burn you alive with the scroll from which you study. Hanina ben Tradion replied only this, my master, but am I destined for the world to come after my death? Rabbi Yossi asked, has anything exceptional happened to you lately that might offer a sign? Hanina replied, well, by accident, I mixed up the money in my purse with funds from the poor. Not knowing which was which, I put all the money aside and gave it to the poor. Rabbi Yossi replied, as if to say this is a symbol or sign. Ah, in that case, may my destiny be as good as yours. You're guaranteed some wonderful end in the afterlife. Soon after, Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma died, and all the great leaders of Rome came to bury him and speak in his honor. As they returned, they found Rabbi Hanina ben Tradion sitting in study of the law before the masses he had gathered, with the scroll of the Torah at his breast. They took him away, wrapped in the scroll, and surrounded him with burning wood, though they left a moist sponge upon his heart just to prolong the suffering. At the end of the life of Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, listen to the way he encounters his visitor. What concerns him most in that moment? He speaks about only one thing to Hanina ben Tradion. He says, "My brother, you are in danger. I'm not you." Yossi ben Kisma is about to die. He's worried about himself. He should be worried about where he'll go in the afterlife, just like Rabbi Yochanan did. And yet, he spends his last energies, his last waking breaths, perhaps, caring about another person. So all of a sudden, that sense, I wanted to read Rabbi Yochanan as a gracious person about other people, and Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma is kind of self-engaged and self-centered. But the stories from the ends of their lives just turn that around radically. At the end of his life, Rabbi Yochanan is worried about his own salvation. And at the end of Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma's life, he doesn't think about himself at all. He doesn't think about the nobles who will come visit. He doesn't think about anything that awaits him after this journey. He thinks about the welfare, and he uses his last breath to desperately beg a friend to protect himself. So all of a sudden, the personification, the kind of impulses and the kind of motivations for these two sages, they feel very, very different. Also, one difference as well, which I want to just call out from that text. Yochanan ben Zakkai couldn't see forward into the future. He had a clear vision of the present, a clear vision of people in front of him, but he couldn't look into the future. Yossi ben Kisma, he didn't see people in front of him almost at all, but he has this prophetic sense for what will happen in the future, and he's very concerned about how that thing that happens in the future will impact other people. So I'm going to kind of come to a call. I left in the document a little discussion about how we might see these two sages as on a spectrum from self-focused to other-focused. But the more that I read the two of these sages together, I'll give kind of a brief sense. I thought they were two very different personality types, and in the end, I see them drawing closer and closer together as to the quality of their character and the kind of goodness in their souls. I have a sort of takeaway, but I'd love to invite thoughts, would love to invite your responses, and while you get yourself on your keyboards and raise hands, I'll simply say this: the ability of one sage to be very, very, very concerned about who is immediately present for him is an important lesson for us right now. The ability of the other sage to look into the future and see the implications of present events as they move into the future are also really important for us right now. I think we're in a place at times where raising is from afar. Really caring about the physical welfare of someone has to do with figuring out how much distance to set aside. And perhaps our challenge right now is not to feel that we're disconnecting our love, our affection, and our care when out of necessity, we're pushing back physically. It's balancing two completely opposite dynamics. And I think it's part of the spiritual whiplash, at least that I experienced in the age of Corona. I so much welcome your thoughts about any of the texts that we read, your comments, and Julia, I turn back to you.